That's not what Mr. Panetta says.
We had 150,000, 175,000 troops in Iraq during the surge, as you know. There was still a risk from al-Qaeda. They still were having successes on the ground.
Much different scenario. But we had basically won the war after those 175,000 troops were there. We had won. The vice president said that Iraq could go down as the administration's greatest success. Things changed after we did the surge in Iraq. We were doing much better. And then the president's critics say we snatched defeat from the jaws of victory because we pulled out the troops and there was no one there to protect the gains.
But Megyn, are you arguing that 10,000 troops or 5,000 troops or 25,000 troops would have been able to fight back against ISIL when 150 or 175,000 couldn't have held back entirely al-Qaeda?
It's not Megyn Kelly arguing it. It's Leon Panetta, who's in a much better position to know. He talks about how I voiced to the president that this country could become a new haven for terrorists to plot attacks against the United States if we withdrew all the forces. Isn't that exactly what happened?
That is not what happened. Also, the growth of ISIL, it was not just in Iraq. It was because of safe havens in Syria where they were allowed to grow and prosper for the last couple of years.
Well, there are issues there, too. There are issues there, too, about the president not enforcing the red line he set. But I'm focused on Iraq because that's what Mr. Panetta is talking about. The president, when he was running for re-election, Jen, went out there and had a debate with Mitt Romney in which Mitt Romney said, I think you agree with me that we should have had a status of forces agreement that would have left these troops in Iraq. The president denied it. The president didn't say, you're right, I did want one, but Maliki and so on and so forth. Let me play the exchange for you.
With regards to Iraq, you and I agreed, I believe, that there should have been a status of forces agreement. Did you? Oh, you didn't? You didn't want a status of forces agreement?
What I would not have done is left 10,000 troops in Iraq that would tie us down, and that certainly would not help us in the Middle East.
There it is.
Well, Megyn, the facts are that the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense at the time, many other members of the administration would not have been negotiating with the government of Iraq about having a presence there if it wasn't supported by the President of the United States.
That's not what Mr. Panetta says, though, Jen. I mean, this is your department. He's saying in his book that State and the Pentagon and Defense were on the same page. But the folks at the White House who work for the man who ran on the promise of getting us out of Iraq, they were in a heated disagreement, and they couldn't convince the White House that if we didn't keep these troops there, this was going to create a vacuum that would create a safe haven for the terrorists, that they couldn't convince them. And now Leon Panetta, an honorable man, I mean, you don't think he's misleading us in his book, do you?
I think I just stated how honorable he is.
Right. So why can't we just accept that is what happened and then talk about why it happened? Why is there a disagreement? Why does the president come out and try to tell us now that he wasn't responsible for this decision when he sat across from Mitt Romney and said, yes, I made the call because I didn't want to get bogged down in the Middle East with 10,000 American troops still there?
Well, Megyn, first of all, the facts of what happened at the ground at the time, I should say, are that we didn't have the protections for troops to remain there. There was
because we weren't offering enough troops.
That is just simply not consistent with what happened at the time. There are a range of people who were involved in this. I know you're referring to
Panetta, and he says it happened the way I'm saying it.
Megyn, first of all, there were events that didn't allow us to keep the troops there. There are accounts that people look back and say it could have, should have, would have. We couldn't keep troops there because the Iraqi government did not want to have troops there, period.
Right. We're replowing old ground, but let me ask you this. This is one of the reasons why people are focused on this, and you can see it in the polls. So people want to understand what's happening, and they're worried. Obviously,
sure,
everybody's worried because President Bush was asked, even today, by our own Brian Kilmeade, who interviewed him, about why he didn't withdraw the troops, why he thought it was important to leave them there. And he referenced with Mr. Bush an earlier prediction he had made back in 2007. I want to play the exchange because it just happened today and get your reaction to it. Stand by.
You knew it in 2007. In fact, this is George Bush, President George Bush, in 2007, before the surge. Well, you're trying to tell people we need a surge, and here's why. Here's what you said, and here's how accurate it is.
Begin withdrawing before our commanders tell us we're ready would be dangerous. It'd mean that we'd be risking mass killings on a horrific scale. It would mean we allow the terrorists to establish a safe haven in Iraq to replace the one they lost in Afghanistan. It would mean increasing the probability that American troops would have to return at some later date to confront an enemy that is even more dangerous.
How did you know?
Well, I know the nature of the enemy.
Wasn't President Bush exactly right?
Well, Megyn, it's hard for me to believe that President Bush would have left troops in Iraq without the protections they needed. It's hard for me to believe that he would have been able to convince the Iraqi government to have a presence there when they clearly didn't want to have one there. So we're back at the same place where there were challenges that prevented us from having a residual force, and we don't believe it would have prevented the circumstance that we've been dealing with over the last 8 months.
Jen, it's been fun having you on, and I appreciate it. You and Marie have done a good job coming on the program, and all the best to you both.
Our pleasure. Great.